in Aberdeenshire. I confess I never actually voted for him, but it did allow me to see and to hear from all those who dealt with him in the north east of Scotland that he was genuinely a byword for the energy and commitment in representing the interests of his Banff-and-Buchan constituents. It was not until I was elected here in 2001 that I got to know him personally. He and I both represented constituencies that were heavily dependent on the fishing industry, which was then facing an existential crisis as cod stocks in the North Sea had collapsed. We all had to be experts at that time in the spawning stock biomass of North Sea cod, and Alex, with his natural head for figures, could sometimes leave everyone in the room breathless as he interrogated the so-called experts on the statistical basis for what they were proposing to do. The survival of a Scottish whitefish industry today is as a result in no small part of his efforts then. It was also in that first Parliament that I met and got to know Alex's wife, Moira. I don't think it's speaking ill to say that Alex could divide a room. Moira, on the other hand, is someone about whom I have never heard anyone say a bad word. She has always been unfailingly warm and friendly. Her devotion to Alex was total and was obvious to me from the first moment that I met her. So it is to Moira Salmond today that my thoughts turn. I can hardly imagine the sense of loss that she must be feeling. So to Moira and to the rest of Alex's family, I send my condolences and those of my party as we mourn the passing of Alex Salmond, a man whose like we may never see again.
Sir David Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. Very, very few people in this House change history. Most of us are moved by it rather than move it ourselves. Alex Salmond was an exception to that, as we've heard from all of the people, mostly his opponents, who have spoken well of him today. He was a brilliant speaker. He was passionate about social justice, and of course he was particularly passionate about his own country and his wish for independence for it, the Scottish nationalist agenda. He was fiercely brave, something we often miss in this place, willing to challenge every established power structure, incredibly energetic, erudite, intelligent, a brilliant leader. And as a result, he achieved the things we've heard about. The Scottish nationalist cause went from, frankly, a minority interest to a central part of Scottish politics, and indeed, frankly, a central part of United Kingdom politics. He changed them all, something very, very few of us will be able to do. It was a tragedy at the end of his career that his own party, his own government turned on him, and I'm not going to elaborate on that today. This is not the right place for it. But what I will do, Mr. Speaker, is put on the record the comment made today by his lawyer, David McKee, who represented him through these really, really difficult times of his life, when he said, Alex's courage and strength of character over the 3-year period, from the Scottish Government launching an unlawful process against him, throughout his criminal trial in which he was cleared on all charges by a jury of his peers, to his unimpeachable evidence to the Parliamentary inquiry, was absolutely incredible. What he endured, the apparatus of the state turned against him, would have broken many people, but not Alex. I will always remember a truly incredible human being, with remarkable insight, strength of personality, and a stoic restraint which many others could not contemplate. Alex was a very proud son of Scotland, but he was also a son of this House, of which we ourselves should be proud. So I finish, Mr. Speaker, by offering my condolences, my heartfelt wishes to Moira and the rest of his family and all his wide circle of friends.
Pete Wishaw.
I think it was with a sense of disbelief that we heard this news on Saturday afternoon, and I think we all had to double check that they were referring to the Alex Salmond that we've all got to know so well. 50 years, he has become a colossus, a huge political figure in Scotland, and it's almost impossible to think of Scottish politics without Alex Salmond. Alec recruited me to the Scottish National Party in the 1990s. He was a fan of a band I played with, and I was able to return the favour to Alec sometime later, where I recorded him and another passion that Alec had, which was singing. Let's just say it wasn't exactly a huge hit and it didn't bother the charts. But Alec was a man of many talents, of many facets that made up this Alec Salmond. Alec, watching him conduct political debate and work a room, was watching a political masterclass in engagement and communication. He was able to do this with a charm that was so effective and it was so beguiling that people naturally felt that he wanted to contribute and be with Alec Salmond. Scotland will miss Alec. We will all miss Alec in the Scottish National Party. And we've always got to remember that he came so close to delivering what so many people thought was almost impossible, Scotland becoming an independent nation, a nation of our own. He took the Scottish National Party from a fringe interest. When I was first elected, it was 5 MPs, and we were on 18% of the vote in Scotland. We came so close to securing an independent nation of our own, and that would never have been possible without the energy, the charisma and dynamism of Alec Salmond. We're all hurting in the Scottish National Party today. We have lost one of our giants in our political movement, and I hope that everybody will extend their sympathies to Moira and to the rest of the family, to his colleagues in the Alba Party, and to everybody who worked with him throughout all these years in a mission that Alec helped to shape and design.
Roberts.
It is difficult to overstate the influence that Alec Salmond has had on the national movements, not just in Scotland, but in Wales too. He has always been a true friend of my party, Plaid Cymru. He is respected and will be respected into the future for his extraordinary resilience and optimism. He made the campaign for Scotland's independence a political reality, and he changed the course of his nation. That is undeniable. As I said, he was a friend to Wales. My friend Peter here already mentioned his many facets. Our former leader, David Wigley, was to invite Alec Salmond to speak in a conference on the Welsh poet R.S. Thomas. I don't know how many people would have expected that, but R.S. Thomas and Welsh poetry was one of Alec's enthusiasms. Every sympathy from my party, Plaid Cymru, to Moira, to Alec's friends, to Alec's family, and to our colleagues in our sister party, the SNP. And I'm sure everyone here sends deepest commiserations.
David Munday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The phrase end of an era is bandied about often, but Alec's passing really does feel like the end of an era. We weren't friends, we had a professional relationship, I would call it. Sometimes it was cordial, sometimes it was less so, because obviously we disagreed on some pretty fundamental issues. But I always respected him as one of the most formidable and indeed ruthless political operators of our generation, and I think he would welcome that epitaph. I think Alec's greatest political triumph was actually to be both establishment and anti-establishment at the same time, and that's a pretty difficult trick to pull off. So whilst he was at one moment First Minister of Scotland, he was agitating to break up the United Kingdom. Whilst at one minute he was highly critical of the Conservatives, he was relying on Conservative MSPs in the Scottish Parliament to sustain his minority administration. And Mr. Speaker, one of my jobs when I was first elected here in 2005 was to keep an eye on Alex in the lobbies, because he had a habit of encouraging chats with new Conservative MPs. And his line was this, that if Scotland was independent, that would be great for them because there would be a perpetual Conservative government in England. Now, recently we've seen that that argument is slightly flawed, but I had to I had to ensure that colleagues were not tempted by that particular argument. Alex was a skilled debater, and very often that was demonstrated in this chamber, despite his expressed wish to leave it. He had an authenticity and a common touch which is so often absent in modern politics, and that was always very evident when you saw him with his constituents. Like the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, I share absolutely his view of Moira Salmond. My dealings with her were always she was always a very charming and supportive spouse, and my heart goes out to her, to Alex's friends and his families at this very difficult time.
Chair of the Select Committee, Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my colleague David Mundell and Jamie Stone, I served with Alex Salmond in the Scottish Parliament from 1999. Alec didn't always stay when we did. Sometimes he came back here, but he inevitably came back to Scotland and became Scotland's First Minister. But of course, even before that, as a Scot interested in politics, I was aware of Alec, and I was aware of his great strength and great courage. I seem to remember that at one point he was not a member of the SNP on a previous occasion, and it's always difficult to rebel against your own party. So all credit to him for doing so then over a point of principle. I was interested in David Mundell's reflection about the lobby, because I've heard stories from new Labour MPs who were encouraged to think about the way in which Scotland would be after independence, but for a different reason. It was suggested to them that Scotland would always vote in a Labour government if we were to be independent. So it just shows how, I suppose, pragmatic, but how astute he was as a politician. He was a great performer in the chamber, whichever chamber it was that he was in. He was someone who was always worth listening to. Obviously, my politics and his were very, very different, but I did share platforms with him on a number of occasions, and it was always interesting and always an education to listen to what Alec had to say. So my thoughts go today, and my prayers, to Moira, of course, and to Gail, and to the wider family, and to all those who knew and loved him.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share too, on behalf of all those at Reform, our deepest condolences to Moira and his wider family. I met Alex Salmond just over 2 years ago in the world of media. I had a radio show for about 2 years, every Sunday, and it was all going fine until I took a holiday and Alex Salmond kindly stepped in. I wrote over 100 shows. I survived the challenges of investigations and things. But Alex's enthusiasm, his energy, his determination in that 3-hour show, it was the only show that I had that triggered an Ofcom investigation. Whilst we differed politically, he sort of sought me out in the media, and I think he took pity on me in a strange way, because he understood the challenges, the mad challenges of trying to set up and run and fund a small political party. And he was so generous with his words of advice, of wisdom and encouragement. And I will never, ever forget that. And none of us like losing. But I was with the honourable gentleman who spoke earlier last year at the Edinburgh Fringe, and we had a debate hosted by Alex Salmond. I won't tell you the topic, but and it was a hearty, inspired debate. And I have to say, I think the honourable gentleman and I, we were like in the lion's den. But it was probably one of those rare moments where actually we enjoyed losing because we lost to a truly great man. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, okay.
Speaker, further to earlier points of order, it may come as a surprise to the members of this place that I have a photograph of Alex Salmond in my back hall. And that's because a long time ago, he and myself and the member for New Forest West were both, all three of us, members of the Students' Representative Council of St Andrews University. And I can remember it was a sleepy organisation, and we debated this and that, and then with a flash and a bang, like Mephistopheles appearing in Dr. Faustus, he was there from nowhere, a fully equipped, fully armed, formidable young politician, still in his late teens. And that came as a shock to all of us. And I can tell you from having debated in student debates with him, if he turned the laser eye on you and fired the verbal sally, it went straight through you and straight through the wall behind you. He was a superb, superb debater. I've never seen his like. And I think what is fascinating, Mr. Speaker, about him is that here was a fully developed politician so early in life who knew exactly what he was about and was determined to achieve his end. I was also, very briefly, in the Scottish Parliament, as the honourable member has alluded to. And he too, in 2007, at a reception in the Signet Library in Edinburgh, said, Jamie, I want a word with you. And he cornered me into one of the little half-moon-shaped alcoves in the Signet Library and told me very forcibly how supporting the SNP government in 2007 would lead to the revival of the Liberal Party in the Scottish Parliament. Mention has rightly been made of his widow Moira, who I found a very, very nice person indeed. And she once stopped me in the Royal Mile, just shortly after Alex had become First Minister, to say that she'd got that dreadful upright piano out of the drawing room at Bute House. She just wanted me to know that. It's not only Alex's family. It's not about just Alex. It's also his circle of friends. He had a circle of friends to whom he meant a very, very great deal as well. And I think our condolences should go to his family and his personal friends as well. Charles Stewart Parnell made his name in history, and I believe Alex Salmond will in exactly the same way for many, many years to come.
Mr. Speaker, I associate myself with so many of the comments from members across the House. I first encountered Alex Salmond when I was a starstruck teenager, a member of the 79 group, attending a particularly fractious SNP conference in Ayr in 1982. Indeed, so fractious was the conference that Alex was subsequently expelled from the party, albeit briefly. But in the meetings that followed, even though he was just less than 10 years older than myself, I listened to this spellbinding oratory of this young man, and he was destined for greatness then. We became close allies in the late 1980s, and I was part of the campaign team which saw him elected SNP leader in 1990. Our paths clearly took wildly different trajectories, but we kept in touch on and off over the decades, and I can say that I wouldn't be here today were it not for Alec having arranged for me to go through to Edinburgh so he could persuade me to put my hat in the ring for the SNP in Argyll and Bute in the 2015 election. And I know that I am far from being alone in being an SNP politician who owes so much, a huge debt to Alex Salmond. He was, Mr. Speaker, a titan of our movement, an irreplaceable force without whom our independence, when it does come, which it surely will, would never have been achieved. My thoughts, as are so many in this House, are with Moira. My experience of Moira is that she was a very quiet but absolutely formidable force. And I learned very quickly that if you want to get Alec to change his mind, you don't go to Alec, you go to Moira. Because Moira was an incredible force in herself. So my deepest condolences and sympathy are with Moira and with his immediate family. And I do wonder, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Alex Salmond, when will we see his like again?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful that you've allowed this time to pay tribute to Alex Salmond, because he absolutely well deserves it, and I think it's great we're doing that. And the leader of the SNP spoke very well and very movingly about Alex's contribution to life, and I think that's very generous because the SNP clearly treats its former leaders with great respect, and I think that's a good idea. I also thank the member for Halton Price and Howden for what he said, because Alex Salmond did go through the most appalling stress, personal pressure, and no doubt he had moments of self-doubt and real concern about the whole thing. And I think the fact that the member of Halton Price spoke so well about it really is a testament to what Alex was actually made of. During his time here, he was a good friend to lots of us. He always opposed wars. He always stood up for civil liberties and for justice. And his strength of character in Scotland and the wider world actually made the SNP the party it is, the formidable force it became, and it made the arguments for Scottish independence something that was cogent, realistic and understandable. And I think we should just remember Alex Salmond lived life to the full, spoke to the full, was totally involved in absolutely everything he did, and was this amazing, actually very friendly force around this place. And I, for one, will miss him and send my condolences to Moira and to all of his wider family and all of his colleagues in both Alba and the SNP in Scotland.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Consequential, impactful are words that we've heard about Alec over the past few days from across the political spectrum and beyond. And which of us would not want an epitaph that said that, regardless of our politics? Alex was also impactful on so many of us on an individual basis. I got dragged back into politics on more than one occasion, having unwisely tried to pursue a career elsewhere. And obviously his desire for independence and to remove, as he'd see it, this unnecessary layer of government was at the heart of his politics. But he was a profoundly impactful MP in here. He knew the standing orders inside out. That could make it tricky for ministers, opponents, for speakers from time to time as well. But that hard work meant that he was always, frustratingly, from my experience, always one step ahead. It was impossible to spend time with Alec and not learn something. Absolutely impossible. And my honourable friend, the member for Argyll and Bute, was right to talk about Moira Salmond as being formidable. She was also wonderful. And I can remember on more than one occasion being past Moira to Moira for a chat after a very robust exchange with Alec. She was always there so that we could figure things out and to smooth things over. Finally, the member for Caithness mentioned Parnell. Alec mentioned Parnell as well. Parnell was somebody who laid the groundwork for independence and for whom, to paraphrase Alec when it came to independence, the dream shall never die. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Okay. So Desmond Swain.
Mr. Speaker, he was a great friend at university and also in this House. And despite political differences, I speak from personal experience, he was a man capable of very great kindness. And I shall certainly miss him, and Moira certainly has my condolences.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Unionist Party, I would like to join right honourable and honourable members of this House to express our sincere condolences on the death of Alex Salmond. I would like to begin by assuring Alex's family, his wife Moira, and all of those who loved him that our thoughts and prayers are with you all at the time after the sudden shock of losing Alex. I think we are all indeed the poorer for his passing. Over the years, Mr. Speaker, I did a number of interviews with him in the job that he had for a certain station. While his interviews with him were always enjoyable, he always had a chat to you beforehand in relation to the questions he would ask you, and so that you were then able to prepare for the answers for the questions that were forthcoming. But he always did it with humour, and he always did it, and it was always a delight. He sat just in front, I sat behind him, I should say, in the House for the couple of years that he was here and I was here at the same time. I remember he's a man I've seen on TV, so I wasn't quite sure what sort of a person he was, but again, it was a pleasure to get to know him, and he was most disarming. He was a colossus of nationalism. He always asked me about the colossus of unionism, Dr. Ian Pacey, because they were two detrimentally opposed people of politics, but in many things they were the same. So his questions were always about those who he had served with and those who he had the pleasure to be with. And that made him, for me, a much more human person, perhaps, and brought the person to life more than the TV did. As has been said, Alex was a man of great passion and a wonderful speaker. Although diametrical opposed in terms of our unionism and nationalist views, Alex's passion was the stuff of Scottish folklore and reminiscent of the rich culture of Scots in the past who gave their all for their ideal. This was a quality I could admire, even though I could never agree. But that was okay, because Alex was enough of a politician to give respect to my firmly held views on unionism. He was a man of sincere beliefs, Mr. Speaker, a consummate politician. He was also a man of great pride. He was proud of his culture, he was proud of his roots, and also what he believed Scotland had the potential to be. And today in this House, with his passing, we recognise and respect the memory of this proud, passionate politician who opposed, who led, and who inspired us all in turn. Thank you.
Kilcrite.
Speaker, on a point of order, can I pass on my condolences to Alex Salmond's family, friends and former colleagues, and on behalf of many constituents who would have known him and supported his cause. As a journalist, I landed very few blows, very few journalists landed any blows on Alex Salmond. One quarrel in 1992 on fishing, as the Right Honourable Member for Shetland has mentioned, was forgiven eventually, I think, in 2006, by which time Alex Salmond had transformed himself and his movement. He'd stopped being thrown out of his party and been thrown out of this place, and replaced that complaint with a message of optimism, hope and self-confidence, often based on his own hope, self-confidence and optimism and nothing more. But that great skill, that great communication skill, and that ability to forgive, if not to forget, to have political opponents but not political enemies, was one of his great legacies to his party and to all of us in this chamber and to Scotland.
That completes the points forward. I'll just let the front benches change over.